Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Panel for Environments, Communities and Partnerships on the evening of the 5th of December. Starting off the agenda, any apologies? I think there's a number, Becky.
Yes, so we have apologies this evening from councillors Lowe, Hunt, Criswell, McAdam and Tevlin.
Thank you. So, item 1, minutes. Is everyone happy with the minutes? Happy that I signed them off? Thank you. So, item 2, members' interest. Has anyone got a declaration of interest to share?
I think
Sharika. Well, pardon me, Councillor Rockball.
No worries, thank you. I'd just like to declare an interest as a non-directed shareholder in a business in the urban environment, not rural, but I just thought I'd just do that for clarity and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rockball. Any other interests? So moving on to Councillor Hassel.
Yeah, I'm not 100% certain of this, but I'm going to declare it anyway, is that in the rural settlement list, although Buckton and Diddington are now no longer on the rural settlement list, it was previously, so I may make a few comments. I'm not sure whether that's appropriate or not, but better to be safe than sorry.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hassel. That's noted. So moving on to item 3, the Overview and Scrutiny Working Programme. Everyone's had a read of it. Becky wanted to jump in on this with some comments and questions.
So obviously you've got the papers within the pack. One of the questions that was coming forward in that you've all expressed an interest in setting the agendas going forward. Last month you had the Priority 1 Delivery Update Quarter 2 report, and there were comments that you felt that was maybe not best placed to come to an ONS panel, but might be better to go to a member briefing, and then if there were any matters arising out of that Scrutiny would like to look at, it would then come to a further panel. So with that in mind, we're currently scheduled to see the Quarter 3 report in February. Is the panel happy for that to be moved to a member briefing space, and then should any comments and questions arise out of that, obviously you can request that it come to a future panel as well, but in the first instance to go to a member briefing space. Happy for any comments or observations, or have you?
Has anyone got comments on that?
Looks like everyone in agreement.
Yeah, I'm happy with it.
Lovely. So we'll make that adjustment. And that was the only query on the agenda setting at the moment, because obviously we've just got some items on there. We're just obviously bringing through some bits for the new year as well, so obviously we'll keep you updated as well on that.
Councillor Hassel.
Yeah, just to get an update on, I thought we were going to have a session with Chris, the trainer, to work through what was going to be on the agenda. And I know also I put a couple of items in as suggested items, one from a resident, but also one on flooding for this group as well. So can you give me a status on where we are? That'd be great. Thank you.
So with the future training session, we're looking at some dates for the new year for that, to see when we can plan that in alongside council meetings and obviously the trainers' availability. So we'll be in touch with you all about a date for that. With regards to the 2 potential items for research, one of those sits with the other panel, and we're looking at ways to move that forward with them. And the flooding item that you had suggested, just looking at that with some officers and looking at how we can bring that to the group and what format that will look at. So we're just in progress with that as well. But as soon as we've got an update, we will do. But I think we're going to keep formatting the work programme document as it goes forward, so that we can make sure we capture some of these things within there, because the traditional format of it didn't allow for that. So I'm just going to keep adapting it. If things look to be missing, please let me know, and we'll make sure that we're capturing all the different elements of that as well as we go forward.
Jeff, I can just come back on that. I think it's really good, thank you. The only thing I would say is when we are looking at the work programme, it would be just good to get, because of when we looked at the health and wellbeing strategy and we decided to move it, we did that retrospectively after it was presented to us. And it would be good just to see why everything, for what reason is something coming to scrutiny on each one of those, because we just got headlines rather than, and this is coming to scrutiny because, and often it's just for comment, and sometimes those ones are for comment are probably, there might be better things that we can do with the committee.
Absolutely, and that's something that we are pushing back to officers on, so that because at the moment all I have is the headlines that you get. That's all the information that I have. So I am pushing back with officers to get some more detail, and as I get that, I'll push that forward. If it happens that it falls outside of a balance of when the meetings are, rather than leave that for the next meeting, we might then communicate that to the group by email so that you can make a decision, and then we'll note it in the next meeting to say that following that discussion that's been moved here or there. But as I say, I'm just waiting for some detail on some of the other items that are on there, and as soon as I've got that, I'll communicate it out so that we've got that.
Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a point that I raised in relation to CSPs, community safety partnerships. You might have seen that I sent an email.
Yes.
If we could just sort of consider that, really. One is, I used to sit on the police and crime panel, and personally, I've not heard a great deal about it since then, really. So it'd be nice to get a briefing or just an update at this committee, really.
Yes, and again, that's one of the things that I've got in progress, just to try and get some detail and sort of looking at how we can fit that in. So as I say, we'll develop the work programme so that we can start to capture some of those items where we haven't necessarily got a date, but that we know that they're in progress, as it were.
Is anyone? Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. Just following up on my email, and I've raised it at full council about looking at the figures for the success rates of the freighter collections. That I think it's important that it comes to us to look at, because I know there was strong vocal support on Facebook in my ward, but I know we can't make policy on social media comments. So I think it's good to have a detailed look at that.
Yes, and again, that's on the list that we've got pending, so we're sort of in discussions with officers so that we can bring some of those forward.
So again, if anyone's got any ideas they want to bring forward, send an email, fill out the form, and we'll bring it to the panel to consider discussing it. Any other comments on the overview and scrutiny working programme? Then we'll move on to item 4, business rates rural settlement list, and we've got Councillor Ferguson and Katie to present.
Thank you, Chair. This is a reoccurring item, so I think this is probably the third time I've presented this paper in various forms. As you all know, this is down to Section 42B of the Local Government Finance Act 1988, of course amended by the Local Government and Rating Act 1997, which is a fantastic piece of legislation. But what it does is it allows us to give rural rate relief to certain businesses in villages or defined areas that have populations of less than 3,000 people. Now, every year we're required to review this to see if any of those villages have grown to a level where they no longer count as villages and are now defined as urban settlements, which is basically a population of 3,001 or above. And there is we do have some latitude to try and make differences. So if there's a defined geographic region in a village, so a village is split perhaps, we can define that as a smaller area. So this year there are 3 villages that have grown above the 3,000 level. Those are Buckton and Diddington and the Stookleys. Is Buckton and Diddington a single village, or is it three different villages? And so those have risen above 3,000 people, and therefore businesses in those areas are no longer qualify for rural rate relief. In fact, there aren't any businesses that would qualify anywhere. So that it's a change, but it might affect a future business, but none of the existing businesses. The other area is the parish of Fenstanton, which we have previously designated as a defined settlement. So it's one of those special exceptions where we tried to build an area so that the single business that would benefit from this could get rural rate relief. Unfortunately, that designated area has now risen above a population of 3,000. And so we have to reclassify that as an urban area. And so this time round, the first time we've had this happen since I've been presenting these papers, we have a business that was no longer, that didn't have to pay, that was subject to rural rate relief, which will no longer be. So obviously there's going to be a financial consequence for that business, which is unfortunate. But this is government legislation, and I don't think there's very much we can do about it. So I think you've all read the paper, which is excellent. Katie, do you have anything to add to that at all? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Has anyone got any comments and questions on this item? Councillor Hassel.
My question really is I'm picking up on, is Diddington is wholly separate to Buckton. It's, there's significant, there's probably as much distance between Diddington and Buckton as Brampton and Buckton. I think Brampton's possibly closer. So I guess my question is, if you made it Buckton and Diddington, I think Diddington potentially, because it's a small hamlet, it is potentially going to lose out. And if you took Diddington off Buckton, would Buckton then fall below the 3,000?
So Buckton wouldn't fall below the 3,000. There are no qualifying businesses in either of those areas. So the businesses specifically need to be the only food shop or post office in the settlement, and there's a limit on the rateable value, so the size of those premises, or the only public house or petrol station. And again, there's a limit on the RV, but there aren't any qualifying businesses in that area.
If I can just come back, I would just say to defend Diddington, which is also part of my ward, it would be good to separate Diddington, just in case there is a possibility that they may open a pub or a shop in Diddington. And it seems unfair that they not classed as a rural settlement. So if I could make a recommendation that we separate Buckton and Diddington as two separate entities, for Cabinet or yourselves, please.
So just to confirm, is that something we can do, Katie?
Yes, it is.
And I don't have any objection to doing that. I think we have these powers to try and make as many exceptions as we can to protect local businesses. So if any qualifying business was to sprout up in Diddington, I think we'd be pleased to support them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
So just to clarify, Councillor Hassel, are you proposing an additional recommendation be added to the report for Cabinet, in that you would propose that Buckton and Diddington be separated into two separate villages for the purposes of this report?
I am, yes.
And is there somebody who'd like to second? Councillor Muckball?
Yeah, I'm happy to second, thank you.
And then could we just take a vote of those in favour, please? And those against? And no, abstain. Thank you very much. I'll add that in for you.
Anybody got any other comments on this item? Or questions? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. It's not as such about the actual proposal itself. For future reference, I know this comes round to us every year. Personally, I find it quite handy. I mean, you highlighted when you presented which I'm going to call them wards had changed. It'd be quite handy just to have that just as a summary in the report itself, perhaps, just to make it a bit easier to read. Thank you.
Happy to do that.
Any other comments or questions on this item? Then thank you, Councillor Ferguson and Katie, for your time. So moving on to item 5, Net Zero Villages Projects Proposal 2024-25, and we have Harriet and Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. Before I talk a little bit about the report that you've been provided with, I wanted to give some background information about the fund. In 2022, the combined authority set aside £1 million in capital towards something they called Net Zero Villages. And I sit on the Combined Authorities Environment Committee. I'm the vice chair. The leader of South Cambs is the chair. And over a year and a half, both of us observed that capital fund sitting there and not being implemented or not being distributed to the villages who we thought it was intended for. So earlier in 2024, both of us lobbied for that fund to be devolved to the local authorities involved in the combined authority, and to let each area distribute it to villages, because that's where we wanted it to get to, and we want climate action to happen as quickly as we can. So once that had been agreed in concept, we had to decide, well, if we have a pot of 1 million, how do we split it? So the combined authority has 6 different areas, geographic areas in it. So Cambridge, East Cambs, Fenland, Huntingdonshire, Peterborough, and South Cambs. And in the end, the way of splitting it was decided to take 2 things into account. The first was, how large is the population that's rural in each of those areas? And that was given 25% weighting. And then the next question was, how much of the population is in an area of deprivation? So that was getting a 75% weighting. So when you took all those things into account, we started off with 1 million, and in the end that meant that South Cambridgeshire got £402,000. They have 50,000 more rural residents than we do, but somewhere like Cambridge City got 0 because they don't have any rural residents. So in the end, I think that was quite a fair proportion, and that meant that Huntingdonshire has received £285,000 to spend on this project. Also with the permission to use a small percentage of that for officers to be able to make sure it gets to villages quickly. So a little bit of that capital will be staff time that's capitalized. So what is the Net Zero Villages Fund? This is something that our rural residents, if they have a project they would like to achieve on a community building, can apply for capital projects. The minimum is £5,000 that they can apply for. And I'm hoping that we'll see ideas come forward like increasing insulation on a village hall, maybe putting film on the inside of windows on a community building that gets too hot, solar panels, if they can work out a budget that fits within the constraints of this project. And it's not just the financial constraints, but we also need them to have completed the work quite quickly. Haz is going to talk through the timeline in a minute, but almost all of the requirements to be eligible for the grant have already been set by the combined authority when they granted us the money. But Harriet and I had a meeting with the climate working group earlier this week, and trying to work out a way that we can involve them as much as possible in this project. And so over the next few weeks, we'll talk a bit more with the climate working group about when the applications have been received, how they can be involved with what happens next. We don't have that ironed out quite yet. I think I'll let Haz talk through the timeline of what's proposed, and then we'd love to have your questions.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport-Way, and good evening, everybody. Just to set expectations of the timeline of the launch of the Net Zero Villages project, we're aiming to launch it the week beginning the 16th of December. The CPCA guidelines have stipulated that the absolute latest this is launched is the 31st of December. We're then going to allow a period of time for expressions of interest, and that'll take us through to the 24th of January 2025. Following this, we'll have a period of time for consideration, and that's between the 27th of January and the 31st of January 2025. Then the successful expressions will be invited to complete an application. That will be from the 3rd of Feb to the 28th of Feb in the time in which they will have to complete that. Between the 3rd of March and the 7th of March, they will then go to a board in a similar vein to a Community Chest grant or subsequently the Hunts Futures grant, and be considered, and the successful and unsuccessful applicants will be made aware of the decision. The decision will be communicated to them by the 10th of March, with publication of the successful applicants being given by the 14th of March as requested by the CPCA. I'll pause there for the moment in case anybody has any questions.
I'm just going to add a few more points that have just come to me. So please notice in the paperwork that there are 3 areas in our district that are excluded. So obviously this is intended for rural villages, so it doesn't apply to community groups in St. Neots, St. Ives, or in Huntingdon. That's part of the original idea of the fund. So in areas like East Cams, Ely is excluded, Soham is excluded. So it's being applied the same across all of our districts. And one of the most important things that I need from you is help getting the word out about this. So even though the fund isn't open quite yet, it will be soon, your community groups can be thinking about and getting quotes for work that they might want to apply. For example, I've been speaking to the Village Shop in Great Paxton, encouraging them to think about what might they want to do and can they get quotes ready to go. Did you want to add one more thing, Haz?
Thank you. Yes, please. I'd like to add that the boundaries of each of these towns, they've been defined by the Office of National Statistics. So in case you're wondering about how those boundaries are going to be set out, we have that information already, which I can send you afterwards if you are interested.
Thank you, Harriet and Councillor Davenport-Ray. Has anyone got questions? Councillor Bywater.
No, yeah, maybe a quick, easy question for you. It's really good. Thank you very much, and good effort for getting the money out of, to be using it. It's really, really good news. I'm just thinking about how we can communicate that. Are you going to be releasing anything like on social media or parish councils? How do we reach out to those? Because I'm sat here thinking of a few schemes that are running through my head at the moment that I can tell people about, really.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bywater. Absolutely. Working on some social media comms as we speak. There'll be communication going out in the next parish and council newsletter, which I believe is on the 17th of December. So you'll have that information and a little check sheet of examples of the type of projects that organisations can apply for.
I would also add that we told town and parish council groups at the town and parish forum already. We knew it was coming, and at the climate conversation. So some of them will already know, but please do, if you go to any meetings in your parish areas, please encourage them.
Councillor Orban.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is really encouraging. It's great to be in a position to say that we can give some money out, particularly as it's not ours. I know it's coming from the combined authority. Just to clarify, so under this, a village hall in a village that's owned by a parish council wouldn't be eligible, but a village hall that's owned by a trust, a community trust, would be. I think that's before we get our parish councils too excited. It's good to get that clarified, please.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Orban. Parish councils can apply. They are able to apply as stated in the guidelines as provided by the CPCA, and I can send you an example of that after this.
Thank you. I'm glad I checked because I'd misread that. So that's really exciting because I can think of at least 2 projects in my ward. So that's fantastic. Thank you.
Anybody else with questions? Councillor Hassel.
Yeah, just a question on the future, because I think I predict, just see my fellow councillors here, thinking of all the funds that and projects that we can make use of. So fantastic to get some money, particularly from the combined authority, as Councillor Orban said. But what about the future? Is this likely to re-emerge? Are there any other pots of money out there that might be beneficial either to towns or villages?
So as HDC's representative on the Environment Committee at the Combined Authority, I definitely take that responsibility on myself to be advocating for this type of funding in future budgets. At the moment, there's only the 1 million spread across all of them, but the committee certainly seems, based on how this goes, interested to perhaps do that again. There's a similar pot of money that had also sat on the books for quite a while, which I can send you more information about later. It's not specifically directed at rural areas, but there is a similar scheme that the Combined Authority is going to operating themselves.
Yeah, just to come back on that. Yeah, I think, so it sounds like even if, because if an oversubscription wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing because it might encourage the combined authorities to put more money into this budget going forward. Am I correct in making that assumption?
that would certainly help me make the case in budget setting at the combined authority in future years. But also, you see in the timeline, there's an expression of interest, period. So the groups coming forward mean we also as HDC know what groups are out there that have projects, so that when new opportunities appear, we can go directly to them and say, we know you applied for this, perhaps you didn't make it in that, but there are more opportunities appearing.
Councillor Hassel, just to add on to that, one of the prerequisites within the application will be to demonstrate longevity and project replication if possible. So if we get a load of examples from that, we can then take that to the CPCA to then potentially take it further. Thank you.
Councillor Orban.
So just a quick touch up. There's 4 out of the 7 of us here whose minds are already whirring that where we can help get this spend. Just as a broad approach, if we get more applications than we got money, would we look at giving everybody something, provided they met the criteria, or would we fully fund one project and maybe not fund another one?
So that's something that we haven't quite decided yet, but I think the Climate Working Group will help us decide what we will do in that situation. So we'll probably have more than one times that the grant panel is going to have to meet in order to look at what we've had in. If by the end of the first meeting we've granted all of it, then we'll have to, that's all that we will have. Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I'm hoping the Climate Working Group will be able to help us decide what to do when that happens.
So we need to consider if it's a first come, first served, or wait till everyone's in and then make those decisions and select the ones which seem the highest need, prioritise. Anyone else with other questions? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. Obviously it mentions a project support officer. What sort of role would the project support officer have in the, is it sort of administering the funds or assisting with the projects, or how would that work?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Shaw. Absolutely right. It'll be administrative support, communicating out decisions to the applicants. Once they've received the money in the beginning of the projects, we'll request monthly check-ins, so they'll be responsible for ensuring that those check-ins happen as well, things like that.
Sorry, not quite supplementary. Assuming someone's granted money and there's delays on the project and they can't meet the deadlines stipulated either by us or the CPC, I don't know who stipulated the deadlines, do we know what happens then?
The CPCA have been pretty strict that projects must be completed by Saturday the 28th of February. In terms of the next step of what would happen, would you like to add anything on that? If not,
I think it would really be on a case-by-case basis. So we would have to go back to our original funder, the Combined Authority, and ask, based, if we wanted an amendment to our funding agreement, we'd have to request something like that and be considered.
So that really needs to be considered by the working group in terms of what is being proposed as well. Yeah. Councillor Motball.
Thank you. On the unlikely chance that there's more money left over than applied for, would it then go towards other villages that don't meet the restrictions at the moment?
If we don't have enough applicants that meet the criteria for us to make grants to, then the money returns to the Combined Authority.
Councillor Orban.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on the point that you made, I think that's really clear about criteria that we use. And if as you and I are both on the working group, if we don't meet beforehand, when the request when we're opened up for requests to come in, if we can meet before then and set a criteria, I think that would be best. But if we can't, if we decide a criteria and we clearly communicate it, so that everybody knows what decisions we made and why, and I think that's clear.
Yeah. We can communicate between us, yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you so much, Harriet and Councillor Davenport-Ray. It's exciting. We look forward to see who comes forward. Thank you.
That's the last item.
Yeah. So that was our last item. Thank you very much for your contributions and your time, and we'll catch up soon.
Okay.